All right, we're gonna get right into this because it's cold. It is the 10th of December 2024. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of InTheImageClothingCompany, a clothing company that is so much more than just a clothing company. We are called In the Image Clothing Company because we are all universally designed in the image of our living God, who is Jesus Christ. And we discuss the skeletal system of the human body and allow it to work mostly through clothing. It's the only thing placed physically directly on us at all times. It has the highest potential out of anything we could come in contact in our lives to alter our body's natural workings. And the skeletal system only works the way that it does. It only connects the way that it does. And it just has the functions that it has, the rotations, the ranges of motion. And we come into this world and then get altered through imbalances within clothing, unnatural materials, and our bodies get into these chronic patternings that are universal across humans because clothing design is pretty darn universal and we all live within the same world and we're dealing with the same things. So we also discuss things that are flat in the world when our hands have that natural rounding and radius to them. And so our feet as well really love to have texture, just because in nature there would always be some sort of texture for those arches in our feet to grip and have that good gripped arch, good nails on the hands and the feet, you know, the ends of the fingers, the ends of the toes, to allow support. Everything within the body has a neutral, and from there it can go this way, from there it can go this way, right? When we talk about the hips, the shoulders, the wrists, the ankles, there's a neutral position in those things, the neck and the jaw, and from that neutral is where we should be operating out of, and that's where we're going to use the least amount of energy from the body, is if the body's in its neutral foundation as I'm standing now, and then from there it just works out of what I discuss as the body's only position. Really, our bodies only kind of have one working position. As the entire body working as a whole, that's the only way the body actually works. Otherwise, muscles are going to be getting very sore and stiff because they're compensating and trying to make up for work that other parts of the body aren't doing. And we have to stay vertical because gravity's pulling us straight down. And as long as we're just allowing, that's the key word always at In the Image Clothing Company, our bodies to work, they just will. There'd be no reason why the body wouldn't work unless there was a reason it couldn't. And that could be any reason, but if it can be addressed, we try to do that. So, and it really pretty much always can, to at least quite a great degree. But yeah, we shouldn't ever have to stretch if the body's just been given ranges of motion. The only thing you're doing within stretching is stretching into the ranges of motion the body already has. Is just feeling like it's not allowed to be fully utilized because it's being restricted or inhibited or altered in some way by an external thing. So, all right. A little bit of noise, there's lawnmowers. I'm going to do this video right now. This is the time to do it. Yes, this video is on the lats, the latissimus dorsi, or dorsi, however you want to pronounce it. That really big muscle, it's a big muscle, comes from your arm, across your back, connects into your spine, it comes all the way down like this, and connects into that top ridge of your pelvis, called your iliac crest, right? Those pelvic bones that come up here, comes from your arm all the way down like this, connecting to the edge of your spine and connecting to that pelvis bone, and all the way down to the base, clear to here, from the insertion up here. Big old muscle on your back. It's called your lat. I'm going to say it like this. I'm going to word it this way, that the lat doesn't really do what a lot of people think that it does in the ways that people think that it does in workout communities and things. I have a video for In the Image Clothing Company titled Shoulders Sit Behind the Body, because naturally they do. And that's what we're getting our bodies to, is their only working position, which is their natural functioning position. And so when the shoulders are actually in their natural neutral position, allowing for that neutral wrist and neutral jaw, neutral pelvic tuck to allow the core to stay activated, always the body working as a whole, always, or else things are just compensating, which should not happen if there's anything we can do about it. You know, heels on the ground, all these things, just the way the body would naturally stand. In that position, the lats don't do a whole lot. They get recruited when they need to, working in conjunction with everything else that could play into the same movement, but lats don't really do the function that people are going to the gym and doing these, watch my pelvis, they're doing these like lat pull downs like this and whatever, or like even pull-ups. Within my video series titled The Truth Behind for In The Image Clothing Company, there's a video titled The Truth Behind the Pull-Up, and I discuss how a pull-up isn't a movement that actually transitions over into actual functional movement within any type of daily life. And you can go find that video if you'd like to see more of what I'm talking about within that. But the lats really don't do what people think that they do a lot of times in modern 2024. But because of these chronic patternings that we're in, the lats will be being recruited in movements that they wouldn't normally be. So, because really what they're doing is taking up so much of the work that all the other muscles that would play into, like I said, the same positioning aren't allowed to do because of things within clothing. And I haven't mentioned the prerequisites yet within this video. That's normally right at the very intro, but since before I founded In The Image Clothing Company, I've had 2 prerequisites just to allow the body to have a chance to operate natural. And then we get into depth from there, and there's a lot that we touch on and talk about, anything imbalanced, anything unnatural. Again, what we can address, we do. So, first prerequisite is to lace your shoes with our technique. Included with the technique is just to tie your shoes evenly over toward the inside. And that just allows your feet to be unaltered. Any other shoelacing or tying combination will alter your feet in some way. This just allows it to be shaped like your foot. Unless your shoe is different, the inside of the area of the shoe, if that's not shaped as your foot actually is, if there's a heel on your shoe, if there's stretch within the shoe material, those things we can't address with just shoelaces alone, but it will get the shape to be accommodating for those natural arches. And the second prerequisite is to remove all the tags, even within those shoes and everything you wear. And yeah, they do a lot. They cause unnatural gaps that are just changing the way that the body will sit and that the muscles can activate. And they're also slippery and made out of almost always synthetic material that the body doesn't want to have against it at all, and placed within clothing it's forced to. So those are the 2 prerequisites. Yes, so the lat is something, it's so big, it's such a big muscle that if it's imbalanced, it's going to do a lot to your body. This is something I'm going to touch on right now before we get into more of this. The opposing muscle to the lat is the deltoid. Okay, the muscle of the shoulder out here that does this motion. There's a lot of muscles going into just the natural motion and functionality of the shoulder, but the one that's right here that's actually contracting to lift the arm in conjunction with like the upper traps and anything that would play into the movement, the body does work as a whole. The lat, because of its insertion and the way that it pulls, it's actually opposing. Like this would be a deltoid contraction, and this would be a lat contraction. It's the opposing motion as the deltoid. And so the deltoid, being something that will elevate your shoulders, if its opposing muscle is overactive or in an unnatural position or doing more work than it should be, then it's going to be activating more to pull your arms down rather than elevate your body. And I'm always talking about internal rotation and how it's so chronically lacking, it's so chronically essential, and it's actually the position would be in more commonly over external rotation. And there's a lot of reasons as to why that is, and I've discussed a lot of those. I have videos specifically on internal rotation, Give me just 1 second. I have a video titled, There is a Lot to Internal Rotation. I have a video titled, Internal Rotation is Closed Yet Open, where I talk about at the extremities of the body, like the hands and the feet, a closed, like in-line position will allow opening at the joints, like the shoulders and the hips. And that's what I'm always talking about, is the emphasis on internal rotation, because living in the modern world that we do, people are in a constant chronic state of external rotation in their body. And internal rotation is more of an elevated position, because the muscles that cause internal rotation are things like the traps and the rotator cuff, and these muscles that will pull your shoulders up and back, the glute medius that pulls your hips into a tucked position, allowing your core to stay activated. And clothing needs to sit, I say this within videos, just about every single one of them, pants need to be entirely above the hips, slightly higher in the front than the rear, and the tops, the shoulder seams need to be behind that little bone that is actually your collarbone, and then ideally right at the very edges for those edge seams, just to allow the positions of the body to be how they naturally would if they weren't ever altered. Now, the lat is something that will hike the hip, quote unquote. If you've heard about a hip hike, it's essentially like, you know, you're standing here, but one of your hips is quote unquote higher than the other. We might do a full video. I feel like it'll probably happen on hip hikes. It'll probably be within the Truth Behind series. That video doesn't exist yet, but probably because you can't actually have a hip hike. We'll get into more of why that is within, if I do that video. But both your feet have to stay on the ground. So if one's up, your hip's not actually hiked, it'll just rotate your pelvis. Or else you could never even actually put your foot onto the ground. Yeah, so, but it is common for that rotated pelvis to be there. Not only common, but that's like the patterning. Stemming from uneven shoe tying to the right, 85%, give or take, of the population of the world are right-handed. And if you were to just be tying a knot within your shoes and doing it the same on both feet, which is uneven for the entirety of your body stemming at your foundation, that's the way you'd be doing it if you were right-handed. So that's why the prerequisite is what it is. And so that alone will cause this right lat to take over more than, well, than the left side. But also, since tying your shoes toward one side will put that whole side into external rotation, and I discuss how the entire right side of the body is just getting destroyed if you're doing that. So we're not going to get so much into that because there's so much content for In The Image Clothing Company on that. But external rotation, being a dropped position, will emphasize that lats contraction rather than the deltoids contraction, and again the muscles playing into what the deltoid is doing and that internal rotation. So anything that's causing that right shoulder to be any lower than the left, things like the dreaded collar seam, which we have up until today's date 3 full videos on. That seam within t-shirts that's normally on the upper left of the collar, we at In The Image Clothing Company, me being the one who labeled it that, call it the dreaded collar seam. That will place your shoulders into a position where your right shoulder is lower, and so yes, your right lat will overly work rather than working balanced with the deltoid and the body working as a whole. Using flat things with your hand won't allow an open shoulder capsule, right? That's something you've seen me talk about all the time. We have videos for In The Image Clothing Company titled Incorporating a Radius in Daily Life, and there's many videos talking about the radius. My video titled How Cell Phones Affect Body Mechanics, talk about that natural radius within the hand, the rounding to create that open palm. There's many videos that I have that discuss that. Anything that's affecting your hand, because the hand is essentially the shoulder. That's something I mention all the time. If your hand's altered, your shoulder will be altered. And when you think about the shoulder, if you were to be thinking about it in a workout community, for example, you're going to be thinking about the deltoid, because that's like the peak of the shoulder, if you will, right? The deltoid's right on the shoulder. And so if your shoulder's being altered by your hand's flatness, then your deltoid won't be activating normal, and its opposing muscle, being the lat, will then take over and essentially hike your hip, quote unquote, but really it's just your lat's tight. And so you're in external rotation, which is really what the lat does. Take that with a grain of salt, but yeah, because it's opposing to the deltoid, because it's dropping the arm, and your rotator cuff and upper traps and mid traps need to elevate to allow internal rotation. That's how I can kind of say that the lat does external rotation, even though that's a little bit of a blanket statement. It's true because of the position it puts the whole shoulder capsule into. So yeah, if we think about anything that could possibly put that right shoulder lower than the left, like I was discussing, that's going to just cause some sort of abnormal tightness within the lat. And then over time, it's just chronic, right? Our muscles can get what's called like chronic shortening, where they get used to just being a certain length because they've been used in such a restricted range of motion for so long. And that's happening to the lat so commonly. So I have a video titled How Sleeve Cuffs Affect Body Mechanics. And if your shirts are touching your wrists, then you're going to like be trying to hold your sleeve up to do things. And look at my hip, when I like hold my hand or my wrist up, that hip will again, quote unquote, hike. Really it's rotating, twisting the whole spine. But that's the lat that will be, well, inserting right to that top of the crest of the pelvis that's being hiked in a sense. So that'll do it. And that's going to be on your dominant side, being your right side, because if you're using things over here, you're going to essentially drop, even though ideally we're staying centered, holding something like the things we hold in modern 2024 that are so flat. You're going to have this shoulder lower, even if the clothing was balanced, and this hip will hike anyway. So within the video titled How Cell Phones Affect Body Mechanics, even if your phone's a natural shape and you do what you can to modify how you hold your phone to allow your wrist to be pretty well neutral, over time, you're not going to be able to just hold something with your body so natural for hours at a time, and people are using things like that for so long that they'll just fall toward the side that's gonna like get fatigued, and then it's just shortening the distance of the lat. So it's just a chronic patterning. We have our video titled Zipper Modification for In The Image Clothing Company, and I did that to these pants yesterday because I actually bought these pants yesterday, used. And I mentioned how the zipper, at least in right-handed zippers, it'll drop toward that right side, and the hips will be in the same, it's not a hike, but we could, call it that so people can see what I'm talking about, but it's a twist. Same position, shortening the distance of the lat, so that's just from the zipper alone within a right-handed zipper. That's just what happens. All the things playing into the same patterning as the prerequisite. The first one being the shoe lacing and just ensuring that you tie them evenly. So yeah, anything that could possibly put that right side of the body lower, your lat will just be shorter than the left side. So it'll be chronically getting tighter. There's almost no need to even mention the left side's lat, as long as you're dominantly right-handed. But even if you aren't, clothing is, quote unquote, because of the designs. If I hadn't done all the modifications that I do to button-ups to this one, then it would be sitting in a position where it would just be imbalanced and hiking that hip and quote-unquote, right, and shortening the lat, externally rotating the shoulder. Anything oversized, I kind of mentioned that with sleeve cuffs, but even if it's a short sleeve shirt, if it's oversized, again, just the dreaded collar seam alone will place it over toward that side, and just look at my hip, right? When that falls off your right shoulder more than your left. And just the position it puts the top seams in, the collar seam alone. But then if your short-sleeved, oversized shirt is touching your arm here and not allowing it to bend, now your lat will just be the thing being affected by the compensation from not being able to bend your own arm, because if your sleeve is sitting here, you're going to go to bend, you're going to sense it, even if it's not intellectual, your sensory system of your body will notice it, and something will compensate in order for your arm to be able to like bend, and it's not actually bending, it just seems like it's getting like closer to you because something else is compensating, being the lat, even though it may not be the thing actually doing the work, but again, it's going to shorten its distance and it'll get stuck into that chronic shortened position. So it is quite cold out here. Yeah, just really anything, because people are right hand dominant, your shoulders have to be even. The body works as a whole. If it doesn't, if it can't, because of some reason, whatever the reason could possibly be, something else and many things will have to compensate. As I always say, the body should always be activated, everything working as a whole. So if it's not, then since the lats are such big muscles, right, there's one on each side. I think that was pretty apparent, but if it wasn't, that's fine. If you didn't understand that, it's both sides, the same thing, right? It comes all the way down, connects to the spine all the way, from like here down to here on both sides. It's a really big muscle down the back. So, oh yeah, no, there's quite a bit to talk about, because within jeans are something that I just rarely ever talk about, because in order for them to even work to possibly be okay for the body, there'd have to be so much modification done to them that it almost wouldn't be worth it unless you were just so desirous to wear jeans. There's just so many imbalances within the seams and the cuts that it's doing so much to the body. But yeah, within jeans on the rear, well, the whole crotch seam that goes around is stitched overlapping with a double stitch almost always on jeans, and the right side's inside. Like if this was the rear, the right pant side that they stitch is inside, making that glute area smaller. And now look what that does to here. If my right glute gets pushed forward, really what's happening is my lat is just getting shortened. That's really all that's happening. See the external rotation here? It goes external as this position shortens because this gets pushed forward, right? Also putting that right foot out, which is like tying your shoes that way. So it's all the same patterning, just about, yeah, through the whole body. That's, as I mentioned, how I can speak for people across the globe without ever having met them. It's not the human body, it's the things that our human body's natural workings would do, but can't, because we're interacting with the same things, living on the same earth as each other. So, within jeans, there's also, I could get into it. I'm not so worried about talking about jeans in that much depth, but if you do have a tag on that seam, not only is the seam already shortening the whole, volume of where that right glute would be, and so that's not being able to activate, the lat's compensating, it's pushing the pelvis forward anyway, the things I was just discussing. in addition to that, the way that it's stitched, now there's this uneven thing right between your glutes, like right on your tailbone. And then if you have a tag placed over that uneven seam, it's synthetic, slippery, and it's right on your tailbone, which is like the base of your spine. And so since it's uneven, the part that you know, the tag is a little bit wider than the seam, and so it's going to be slippery. But since, like, on this part, if you will, if you can see that, there's more pressure against where that tag would sit than the other side, then it's pressing that slippery thing against your, like, the inner part of your glute right there, like right off of your spine and your tailbone. It's pressing that slippery thing more against whatever side. I just pretty sure it is that right side. If it's not, then either way, whatever side it's doing, it's just uneven is the point. And the muscles just aren't able to activate as naturally. They can't activate naturally at all with something slippery against them, just because it's unnatural. But that will change the activation of your glutes, and that's right on / off to the side as well of your spine, being the center of your body, where your nervous system stems from, where we have to balance. I always mention the 3 things that I say are the center of the body that we can, like, just see are the sternum, right, this bone here, the spine directly behind that, and our nose. And so anything right on the spine, if it's imbalanced at all or altering it at all, that's the center of us. And that's our whole goal, is to get centered because of gravity doing the only thing it does, pulling us very straight down. So that's yeah, that's really big. Yeah. I don't want to feel like I have to mention every single little thing that really does affect the lat, even if it's affecting it in a big way. The point is, check out In The Image Clothing Company. The point is, keep your clothing centered and ideally natural if you can, and just let the body work. Do the prerequisites that we have. It's not about us, it's not about an opinion. The human body only works the way that it does, and what we show and discuss and talk about is universal for every single human, because the skeletal system just has to work the only way that it does. And yeah, so that's why we are what we are. That's why we are a clothing company. That's why I say in the intros, we are so much more than just a clothing company. So I could talk about more, but I think that's gonna be it, actually. Yeah, this is a big video because the lat's a big muscle. It is. It's really big. It physically big. So something that large, taking up that much, I mean, it spans, like I said, from the very base of your spine all the way up to your shoulder, like the upper arm. I mean, it's very, very big. The insertion's really big. It inserts all along the spine and then along the top of that pelvic bone. So it's something that is really just kind of taking that whole side and, like, almost like contracting your back, right? Bringing, like, this part of your body closer to this part of your body, and that's just externally rotating you and turning that foot out that's on that same side. So yeah, I mean, there really is a lot more that I could mention, but the reason I'm having this little pause is for myself to be content with what's in this video, so that we don't have to have a part 2 if we don't. Not that it would be wrong to, but I don't think that there's more that I, like, need to say that would be something that I haven't already at least mentioned within other things for In The Image Clothing Company. So yeah, we will have clothing available made out of 100% natural materials, allowing the body to work, staying centered, fitting correct where I discussed clothing has to, on everybody. And yeah, that'll come. We have In the Image Clothing Company podcast, where we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. Check that out if you'd like to. I love it. And we also have In the Image Clothing Company music. And I'm not sure what direction that's going to take when it comes to music, but I love music, and it's been fun so far what I have done, and we'll see where that goes, because I approach music in quite a few different ways. So, you know, we keep the messages around the gospel and the topics, right? The gospel of Jesus Christ. So, yeah. Anyway, if you're ever going to try to be foam rolling your lats, don't. It's a muscle that shouldn't get tight. No muscle in the body should get tight. The body's a machine designed to operate. That's what I say. Unless something's actually causing it to happen, it wouldn't. Even if you're doing like a lot of physical activity, as long as the body's in its position to work, you might get fatigued after like hours of doing physical exertion. That's natural and normal. That's just how the body works. It expels energy, and you have to replenish it with food and allow it to rest. But the lats should never get tight. They shouldn't. They should not ever. I don't care if that sounds too bold or too much of a claim. It's the truth. If the body's actually just working the way that it's designed, you got your own situations. I mean, but really, it shouldn't. So, first of all, don't foam roll your lats. If they're getting tight, don't try to address your lats. Address things like the shoelaces. Address things like your shirts, the collar seam. Address things like your pants angles and the zipper, you know, rotations and drawstrings. Oh, we have a video titled How Drawstrings Affect Body Mechanics. The knot that I'm using for this is the knot that I show in there. It's called, I'm not going to tell you what it's called. Not that I'm trying to hold back information, but go watch that video. The point is, don't tie drawstrings unevenly, just like shoelaces. Tie things even. That's right on your hips, because if your hips are twisted, it's that quote-unquote hike that people would call. It's not a hike, it's a twist. And that's your lat that's taking over because of the compensation that it's having to do. So that's another thing. Yes, I mean, going to the gym in gym shorts, doing workouts with a drawstring, twisting your hips. I don't want to be so silly about it. I'm not going to hold back the information, even though I said that I wasn't. That is what I was doing. It's called a slipped lap knot, is the knot that I would say to use for your drawstrings. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to go watch our video to know that. I'm sorry. That's not something I should be saying like that. I've already said that I'm not going to be doing that. No, that's what the knot's called. But still, watch the video if you'd like to. I go into really a lot of depth on what it's doing just to tie your drawstring unevenly, because that's directly going straight to your lat because of how I've been mentioning. It's just the muscle that's going to take over because it inserts across the whole top of that pelvic bone and the spine. So the pelvis, taking a rope and going like this, crossing it over, takes your pelvis like this, shortens that lat. If you're going to cross it the other way, well, let's see, which way? Yeah, no, that's this way. If you're going to cross it like a left-handed knot, then you're going to hike this hip, right? So since you're probably tying it the same way you're tying your shoes, you're just pulling on that pelvis like this. Yeah, that's what I mean when I say there's a lot more that I could say. Yeah, I mean, I could just keep coming up with things that aren't little things, but just I've kind of already gone over pretty much everything that I could need to with other videos for In the Image Clothing Company. So I feel like I was saying something before I kind of like got caught with drawstrings. But anyway, yeah, so I do though. I feel like I was saying something that I kind of felt was good to finish. But anyway, yeah, the lats. Oh, they're just such a big muscle. The foam rolling, the insertions, that's what you should focus on. When it comes to the body, if you know In the Image Clothing Company, we, like I say, we're about the skeletal system. We don't address the muscles because you don't need to. All the muscles do is hinge or pivot or rotate the skeletal system. And so as long as the skeletal system is in its position, the muscles will just do their thing. But if the skeletal system's out, then the muscles can't, and compensation happens. So